I'm Jake, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be picking up where we left off at the end of the last video. I've had this car fired up for the first time, but we're going to go over some troubleshooting I had to do to get to that stage. We're also going to address some teething issues as well as mapping the car. Stick around to see how I get on. So we'll pick this video up inside the car. We're going to try and get this car started for the first time. There are a couple of issues I'm already aware of. The temperature sensors just seem to be reading some default values, which aren't correct. The lambda sensor isn't working in the ECU. The gauge seems to be working, so I'm assuming that's a wiring thing. But we're not going to worry too much about those for now. We're just going to get this thing fired up and worry about those small issues later. Because there might be something like more fundamental that needs a bit more addressing. So we'll get it fired up first, deal with those small issues later. So the very first attempt at cranking didn't go very well, and basically I was watching this pulse width gauge and it stayed 0 the whole time. So basically the system wasn't even trying to inject anything, which explains why it didn't fire. So what I did was just have a look through the maps again, and there's quite a few maps in here that could have been 0. So intake, air temperature density, the barrow correction table, those were 0. There's like some cranking settings as well. There's also, what else we got in here? The VE table had numbers in, but basically I just went through and checked everything. There was 1 or 2 places where I was still at 0, and I cranked again, and that time I was actually getting some pulse width, which was nice. It did catch slightly, so I think more fuel is the answer. I'll apologise in advance for some of the clips that come after this. Had the noise cancelling on my phone, and it basically sounds like I'm underwater sometimes when the engine's running. So I did start with 35 in the VE table. I'm going to try 45 now because I think the answer is more fuel. No, still nothing. Let's put some bigger numbers in. So let's try 60%. Still nothing, really. So I've just put 80 in the VE map everywhere. Let's see what's going on. Oh, sounded like it nearly went. Oh, we got some life. Oh, it's very nearly, isn't it? So here we go, 85. Oh, that's definitely the closest it's been so far. Okay, so I've got 90 in this fuel table now, and it's gotta work. It's gotta work. Oh, it is. I'm having to hold my foot on the throttle to do this. There we go. We'll call that first fire up done. Okay, I've just updated some of the injector settings, so I think the opening time was set too short for these injectors. It's pure guesswork at this point, but I guess it was too short. So I've made that longer, which will naturally cause it to calculate a longer pulse width, which should lower the VE requirement, and also made a voltage correction on those injector pulse widths as well. just so that when it's cranking, it will add more pulse width, which again will lower the VE requirement. All directionally correct changes. So ignition on, let's give it a go. Again, still having to hold my foot on here. I need to make the idle stop. But sounds right though. Fuel ratio, yes. Let's put some coolant in it as well. So I also need to quickly cobble something up to bolt onto here. So there's two bolt holes here and there's normally like an idle. So when you push that thing in, basically opens the idle control valve. Normally there's like a thermostat based one on there, but I'm just going to get a little bit of plate of metal, hole in either end, hole in the middle for an adjustment bolt, and set the idle stop that way for now. But I'm very glad it's fired up. It means I've not fundamentally fucked anything up too badly. So here we have a little basic idle speed controller thing. It just pushes down on the equivalent of this. Holds it in place. I need to think something better, to be honest. I could do with some closed loop control from the ECU of some variety. It can either be cable pulled, so that can either be a pull, or something mounted here. I'll have to have a look and see what's about, see if there's anything I can get that I can control with the ECU, because that'll make it a little bit better than what I've got. But this will certainly do for the short term, and should allow it to idle at least. So we're back again a few minutes later, and I've not solved all my issues yet, but certainly getting there. So lambda sensor is now working correctly. What happened is the pin for the signal had pushed out of the crappy little Molex connector. If I've not said it already, I bloody hate those things. They're naff. And onto the temperature sensors. So I've diagnosed the problem, and it is this. Whoever wrote this, twat. So how I had this wired up originally, which is basically from these signals through the sensor and then grounded on the other side, is the correct way. And whoever wrote also feed 5 volts can get in the C. So basically I need to undo the change I made previously where I swapped the 5 volt on the ground around, which also involves swapping them around on the throttle position sensor again. But yeah, pretty straightforward. And to avoid me having to change any wiring in the car, I'll just take the pins out of this connector and swap them around. So when I wired up the interior, I wired it up on this updated and now wrong numbering system. So I'll just swap the pins around on this side because it's the easiest way of doing it. And yeah, we shall resume in a few minutes' time where hopefully this issue is resolved. So this is one of the reasons I love these connectors. So there's a locking tab that I've just taken off the front, and inside you can see there's little tabs. You literally just flick one of those up with a screwdriver and the pins pull right out the back. So simple to de-pin. They're quite robust little connectors as well. So once the locking tab's in, they basically can't fall out. Yeah, should make it a bit of a breeze. The good thing about this now as well, because I cut the labels off previously after I rewired them, because these pins are quite small, I can get the heat shrink back over and relabel them. So all's well that ends well. There we have it. These are now reading something sensible. So 21 degrees on the air temp, 29 on the coolant. Did have it running a minute ago. So those numbers seem pretty sensible. Throttle position sensor works. Yeah. Lambda's working. Just need to put some more sensible numbers in some of the correction maps, and I think we might be okay to take it for a drive. So I've just been for a very, very brief drive up and down the road. It's completely flat. There's no traffic or anything. So literally just driving along 20 mile an hour, if that. And turned around and came back, and I had the auto tune enabled. And what this allows you to do in Tuner Studio is basically just drive the car normally, and then it will suggest, based on the lambda readings, some fuel changes. So you can see over here, this was the region I was driving in, so very low load. Tried to exercise a little bit of speed, but you sort of want to hold it steady while you're doing this. So acceleration enrichment is turned off, and then you're basically trying to hold it at speed and load sites to let the auto tune do its work. And then what you can do is come back, apply these to the ECU, which is what I've already done. And then what I will do is basically, judging by which areas it's moved, I will then come and make some manual changes around that in the regions I didn't get. But the auto tune gives you a good idea of what's actually needed. So you can see it's reduced the fueling in this area. I've not made it up here where I've got these 40s everywhere. It seems to be running quite rich, so it's actually just reducing fuel everywhere, which is sort of where you want to be. It drives a little bit nicer when it's too rich rather than too lean. And yeah, next stop is to sort out the fan. Figured I should probably mention, for those that don't know, I've been running this car spark only for the last sort of year or so. There is a video on the channel, I'll put a link up in the corner for that, when I installed this last year. But basically what that means is that at the moment I'm currently only tuning fuel, so very happy with the spark settings, which is why all I did to verify spark when I first fired this thing up was to put a timing light on, just make sure nothing had come disconnected or whatever. But yeah, spark wise, very happy with what I've already got. I'll make any changes if I need to, if I hear any knock or similar, but generally just fueling for this video. So because I have removed the fan switch and fitted a temperature sensor in its way, I'm going to use the ECU. So this pin here is basically a grounding pin. I've already got a relay on the relay board next to the ECU that drives that fan. So rather than grounding via the switch, it's going to ground via the ECU. So I've just got another wire, going to terminate this for the ECU, and then I'll wire it to the relay, which will allow this ECU to control the fan. So in my existing wiring, I found the relay wire for the fan, and you'll see if I ground this. Not sure if it shows up on camera, but you can hear the relay ticking and you can hear the fan come on. So I'm just going to put a different connector on the end of this, a little wire, pin that into the ECU. Job. While I'm up in here, actually, I'm going to wire in this one here, which is the water temp gauge, because the wiring's up in this bundle as well as it goes across the dash. So here we have the water temperature hooked up. It doesn't look like very much, but that is reading correctly now. And I've also got the fan hooked up, so I can specify a temperature in here. I've got it set to 80 at the moment, but if I set this to a lower temperature, there we go, you hear the relay and the fan kick in. Lovely jubbly. That means I can go for some proper drives and not have to worry about it overheating. So now I've got the car running, I've done a little bit of injector open time correction. So this is the number I've currently got, 1.1 milliseconds. I guess it'd be somewhere between 1 and 1.5, they usually are. But anyway, once you get the car fired up and idling nicely, you can do a little bit of tuning. So the way I do this, I'm sure there are probably other ways, but I basically change the number of squirts per cycle and see how that affects fueling. So you need to have like quite a steady idle to be able to do this. But basically, here's a guesstimate. But if you required at whatever idle you're at, a fully open time of 8 milliseconds, so a useful 8 milliseconds, the ECU will basically break this down into, if it's 2 squirts per cycle, 2 times 4 milliseconds plus your open time. So about 5.5 each times 2. And then if you were to change that to 4 squirts, it would then break it down to 2 milliseconds plus your opening time. So yeah, in the case that I've got, which call it 1 millisecond, so that'd be 2 times 5, so 10 milliseconds total. And then this one will be 4 times 3, so 12 milliseconds total.
Obviously, some of that time is not going to be injecting, but you can see how the total time the injectors are active varies between these two based on the opening time. And basically, by switching between these two, you normally have to do it a few times. And in Tuner Studio, if I just close this down, settings, engine constants. So yeah, squirts per cycle, you can change it in here. What's annoying about this is you've got to power cycle the ECU every time. So it's not as quick as it could be, but yeah. And then basically, if your open time is set too short in the software, then the 4 squirts will run leaner. If they're correct, then when you switch the number of squirts, it shouldn't really make a difference to fueling. And the opposite of this is also true. So if your opening time is too long, then the 4 squirts will run richer. Yeah, you basically switch between those a couple of times, and I normally trial and error it. You can normally guess 1, 1.2, 1.5 milliseconds. Should put you in the ballpark, but it's worth doing this before you do much mapping, because if you've got your injected dead time set wrong, it will affect the numbers you have to put into your VE table in here. So worth doing sooner rather than later. Back in the garage again after a quick drive around town with the old auto tune on. I've still not done any proper full load, but certainly getting there. So you can see up here we've got the cell weighting, which is why I use the auto tune, which cells it is filled in, and then below that you can see the changes it's making. And then you can see in here some VE tables, and then what you do is you can apply these or you can do it live. It's up to you. And then you can come back to the VE table proper, and from the changes it's made, extrapolate these out. So you can see I've not been above 5,000 RPM, so I've not made any changes here. But these 40s, I think I'll leave where they are for now. A little bit on the safe side. You can see down here I've made some changes, some 32s based on what I'd seen lower down. And yeah, you just come through here and repeat until you're happy. So you can see, I think the highest I've gone, I think maybe here. I've flat out everything 60 there and above. So I've just dipped into these and it's lowering those, which means I'm a little bit rich, which is perfect. So yeah, just rinse and repeat over and over again. I think once I start getting towards the very high load, like full throttle stuff, what I'll do is not use auto tune. I'll just take some logs and edit those manually. I mean, I should have a fairly good idea what fueling I'll need based on once I get to like up here 60, 80%. But yeah, getting there, and it's really not taking that long, to be honest. Rev it out as much as I'd like to because I'm maxed out on these injectors, which is a shame. But up until 4,500 RPM, drives really nice, full load everywhere, great. And even above 4.5, as long as you're not a full load, it drives fine. Like normal driving is absolutely fine. But yeah, full wide open throttle. Runs lean. Transient bits mapped quite right. There was an upshift there where it went quite lean afterwards. I've just like guessed some acceleration enrichment stuff. I've not really had a chance to play with it too much, but like I said, you drive it normally, you keep up with traffic and stuff, and it's absolutely fine. The basics are done. But I think before I get too involved with like
fine details. I'm going to get some bigger injectors. There's no point in dicking around with everything and then swap the injectors and realise I've got to do it all over again. But on the whole, very happy, despite my miserable face and voice. So here's a data log that shows the fueling issue I was having. So I'm not sure if you were to see any of the numbers, but basically this red line here is throttle position. And I held at about 70% throttle. So not quite full load, although the manifold pressure up the top here in white was 98 millibar. So effectively full throttle at this point. And you can see the RPMs rising up here in green as I've accelerated. And what we have seen here is, so the air-fuel ratio goes quite rich to start with, and as the speed increases, it very rapidly leans off. And through this whole region in the yellow here, we've got the injected duty cycle. So these are basically flat out 95%, which is the max duty currently set in the software. Yeah, just absolute max duty cycle, and yet I cannot keep up with the fuel flow. So I'm going to do a bit of investigation into the fuel system. I have got, if I can find one, some of these. So these are the injectors out of my daily. So these are Honda D16Z6 injectors. They should be 240cc, which will be plenty for this engine. So worst case scenario, I'll swap these bigger injectors in. But yeah, I'm just going to take a quick look over the fuel system. I'm going to drain the fuel out, inspect the filters to make sure they're not blocked up and everything like that. And yeah, hopefully find some fuel somewhere. With zero restriction, doesn't really seem like a lot of flow, I'll be honest. This is after removing the filter. Night and day difference. Way more flow, way more flow. Yeah, that filter was a mistake. It's probably just too fine. But yeah, that's much happier with that. So here we have another data log after removing the filter. The fuel flow looked much higher and I figured might as well give it a go. So I went out and it was driving so much nicer. Had to make a few changes to the maps and stuff because it was running way too rich. But yeah, this is where we are now. So giving it some full load. So this is 100% on the throttle position all the way through this region. I did lift off at the end here. You might see this RPM spike. I think the clutch slipped, but so much power I'm making. Yeah, boys. But yeah, basically 100% throttle all the way through. Injected duty cycle rises with RPMs as expected. But I'm not sure if you see the number here, but the max we reached was 53%, which is right up here. So yeah, 50% duty on the injectors, absolutely perfect. And that was all the way up to, that was 5,300 RPM. So yeah, plenty of headroom on these injectors now. I've removed that filter. Very glad I found that because it was a very easy fix. Yeah, air fuel ratio staying pretty stable throughout. Needs a little bit of tuning to get perfect, but pretty good. I'm not sure what numbers we got here. 12 to 1, 12.4 to 1. So yeah, still running a bit rich, but needs a little bit of tuning, but we're certainly getting there. It's far better than it was before. So I also got a couple jobs done in the engine bay as well. So I printed up some TPU grommets for here, here, and here, these little holes. Gave that a lick of paint as well. Also tidied up these vacuum lines on top of the throttle bodies. They did all go behind. It was like a sort of octopus before, but it's a little bit tidier now. Also tidied up some wiring at the front here that used to jump across from the loom down here. That's not needed anymore. Yeah, it's certainly getting there. I do need to do something proper about the lambda sensor loom, which goes across the back here. So that's just sort of a temporary thing, so I can take it out easily. But I might think of putting a bulkhead connector in, probably under this one. But that's a job for future me. I also need to do the wiper motor wiring. That's still not connected. And as you can probably tell by the car, it has been raining. is suboptimal. But I've got roll hard this weekend and I really don't have much time. So just doing the bare essentials to get it driving, really.
So I've just whipped off the wiper arms, going to undo these screws here, and then, yeah, route the wiring around the back of this and through there. So scuttle panel is off. You can just about see back of the wiper motor here. This is where the loom's going to come into this sort of void. And then I'm going to go through the bulkhead somewhere around here. Sort of don't want it on the bottom because water will go through, whereas on here it hopefully should be okay. I'm just going to have a grope around. There's a bump here. I'll have a grope around inside and see where's got space, because I'll do all the work from this side. Yeah. I think what I'm also going to do at some point in the future, not today, but these are the washer jets. I think I'm going to remove them from this bit and mount them onto here. And there's a similar thing over there. Make some new ones, mount them to there. And that way I can route the washer line through here as well and get out of the engine bay. All little things to make it look a little bit nicer. Here we have the hole ready for the connector. What I normally do is this sort of cover plate that I've made for the outside, drill one hole, bolt it up, mark the second hole, drill the second hole, bolt it up, trace around the inside with a pen or a scribe or something, and then chop it out with the old Dremel. Doesn't take too long. Ready to assemble. We've got the bulkhead connector in the back there, and I've just drilled out a hole here and linked it into this one so I can put the loom through. Also 3D printed myself a grommet, a split grommet, so I can get it over the wire. And yeah, just put this grommet in there, which should hold it all in place. And then once you put the starter motor, wiper motor back on, it should all be held in place quite nicely. What I do if I need a split grommet is print it as a single piece, then cut it afterwards. It's quicker and easier than printing it split, and you know it's going to be like perfectly sized. And there we have it all buttoned up. So bulkhead connector in the back, grommet and wire go through that bit. It all works, although as usual I'm an idiot. I had to put a clamp on the back of here because where I routed this loom through, when the arm came round it was hitting this when this was just coming straight out. That could have just been avoided by moving this hole over here. Like if it was over there, it would have been completely out of the way. But where I chose to put it, I had not considered the throw of the arm as it sort of spins around in the back. But the clamp holds it out of the way, so it's clear. So happy days. Just going to put the scuttle back on and stick the wipers on. Might need to adjust the position of this a little bit to make sure they rest in the right place, but yeah. Cool that. Job done. The new coolant temperature sensor is turned up, so this one's a smaller thread. I've also got the adapter, as you can see, so that's threaded in there. And what I'll do is you'll take this janky thing out and fit this in its place. So plenty of thread engagement on there. Shouldn't stick too far into this housing, so we should have plenty of clearance to the thermostat. And it's a little more proper than that stack of washers. So yeah, basically exactly the same sensor, but same connector and everything, but just a smaller thread. Yeah, for those that are interested, that's the part number. Again, it's a Bosch sensor, so you can go online, Google that number and find the data sheet. Easy peasy. Time to drain the coolant. Coolant is out, as is the old sensor, as you can see here. You can see there wasn't too many threads holding this one in, but it didn't leak and it lasted, so that's fine. Thread the new one in now. As you can see, when they butt up against the housing, the new one is not quite in as far, which is good. It means I got more clearance to the thermostat, which was the original issue. So yeah, get this in and get the coolant back in. There we go, new sensor in place. I've put the coolant back in. Not fired up or anything yet, but yeah, all the coolant that came out is back in, apart from the puddle on the floor. Yeah, new sensor in place, another job ticked off. So I've just been for a drive, car's driving really, really good. I think I'm finally getting there with the mapping. Pulls really nicely, loads of fuel everywhere. And yeah, car's driving great. And on the topic of fuel, got home and found this. Yes, lovely. So I have acquired myself a fuel leak. Let's fix it. So I've quickly whipped off the hose. So this is the outlet of the pump to the fuel filter, and that's from the fuel filter to fuel line. I think I understand what the issue is, and I think it's the combination of these hose clamps and this soft hose. So I'm not sure if you can see, but basically around the end where the hose clamps were, you can see the indent in the hose it's made. But these clamps don't really like this small diameter hose, and there is a certain bit just there where it didn't clamp very nicely. So there's the big indent from the screw bit at the top, and basically this bit just either side of this doesn't clamp very well. So I think that's where the fuel pressure was escaping. So what I'm going to do is swap out for some of these sort of bolted clamps. I've had a lot of success with these in the past, so yeah, just going to put some of this on. And I've also got some of this stiffer fuel hose. This is Gates Barricade hose. It's definitely not the cheapest, but it's a pretty good hose. So I'll replace these flexible bits with this stiff stuff and these clamps, and hopefully that stops it leaking again. Not a massive job, but just a bit of a pain. There we go, lovely jubbly, no leakage. Perfect. I've also, for reference, replaced the high pressure fuel line, which is this one, with the Gates Barricade hose, and replaced all of the hose clamps with the sort of T-bolt style ones. So hopefully no fuel leaks now or ever. So now that I've solved all of my issues, I think it's just a case of more tuning. So I mainly use this auto tune to tune the fuel. So what you do is you basically, I've probably covered this already, but what you do is you drive around and it will compare your lambda versus lambda target, and then basically you'll see in this table here, it will tell you how much time you spent in each cell, and then in this one here it will show you roughly what sort of changes it's making. I'm fairly happy with how the fueling is at the moment. So like I said, once I got the fueling sorted the other day, I made some fairly aggressive changes. Seems to be slightly on the rich side in quite a few places, but better to be slightly rich than too lean. You can also change the settings here to limit how much authority the auto tune has. Set some min engine speeds, min fuel load, etc. This is what I've been using at the moment. Normally I would put the fuel load up a little bit just to get you off the bottom row. But on the last drive I put this to 0, just so it would end up leaning off this bottom row, basically when you lift off and coast. Yeah, just going to do a bit more driving. For some of the full load stuff, I'll take some logs as well. So in Tuner Studio, you can get data logging and take a log. And I think you've seen some clips of what those look like. Again, from there, you can cross-reference your, in this case, throttle position versus engine speed, and then make fueling changes based on what you find. So I'm just driving around town at the moment, stuck in some traffic. The car's driving really nicely, holds its temperature with the ECU fan control. The throttle cable setup means the pedal's not very sensitive at low load, so it's very easy to drive in traffic. No unnecessary revving or anything like that. Yeah, all in all, very happy with this. Mapping's going okay. I've changed the auto-tune stiffness from normal to hard as I'm getting closer. Sometimes on normal it can fight itself, like it'll add fuel and then it'll remove fuel. So yeah, I've changed the stiffness to hard, UR, and yeah, making progress. Basically it's just driving about now. Still don't have acceleration enrichment enabled, but to be honest, it's doing a pretty good job. I think because it's enriched the sort of high load
still at idle speed. Like the off idle is normally where it's worst. To be honest, it's absolutely fine. It's actually driving very, very nicely at the moment. So I think when I do enable acceleration enrichment, it's not really going to make a huge amount of difference. These roads are dreadful though.
So I'm back from a little drive to the shops, just around town, on the dual carriageway a little bit, nothing too exciting, and I've been using the auto-tune the whole time. So you can see here the areas where I've been driving, so the dark green being where I've spent more time, the yellow less time. Down below we've got the changes the auto-tune has made, so blue being adding fuel, red being removing fuel. You can see it's not really made a huge amount of change in the areas that I've been driving in, and that's because the sort of mapping's getting fairly close. So yeah, overall pretty happy with how this is turning out.
So there we go. That's where I'm going to leave it for today. This car is now at the stage where I say it's got the mum tune, as in I'd let my mum get in it and drive it without any instruction. Yeah, just fires up on the key. You can drive it normally, no issues whatsoever. Full load is great. Sorted out all the issues I found along the way. And yeah, overall very, very happy with this. Definitely picked up a little bit of power. Not taken on a dyno, and I don't have any dyno figures from before, but certainly the old seat of the pants dyno says it's picked up a little bit of power. And yeah, that's where we're going to leave it for today. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed, please consider subscribing. If you have any questions or whatever, leave them in the comments below. Yeah, thanks for watching. See you in the next one.